Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin and I'm the host. With me today is Dr. Shaista Hussain. And I'm very grateful that you made the time to join us. You are calling in from Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes, I
Or
am. Thank you, Joaquin. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm
what?
calling from Riyadh.
Riyadh. And
Yeah.
what's the time difference from Europe? What's the time difference from the US?
Well, for me right now, it's 9:30 p.m. So I think we are
Eight
ahead
hour
of you.
difference.
Yeah.
So, you're the founder and CEO and CTO of SAIF CHECK. And could you just give us a little bit on what that startup is about and sort of what led you to that to found that startup?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like I said, I'm so grateful to you for this opportunity, and it's a real pleasure to connect with you. And SafeCheck is the product of a couple of years worth of ideas brewing. I've been in the AI space for some time, for a couple of years, and I'm an ML engineer as well. And having been an ML engineer, my first few projects were focused on something called explainable AI, XAI, and I wanted to take XAI and show the world its importance and its value. So SafeCheck is a company focused on responsible AI, which encompasses many different principles, including fairness and privacy, and justice. And lack of bias and explainability, where it translates as transparency to the end user. So the idea behind SafeCheck is to do audits. We're an audit AI responsible AI auditing firm, and we've got a rubric of evaluating different types of AI models, including the data and the actual models. And the idea is to get a passing score, like just like in school, you get a grade, an A, a B, a C, or a D, or a fail. And you get grades for each different aspect of responsible AI within your AI solution. And the intention and the goal is to try to encourage developers from ideation stage or companies that are already using AI to act responsibly from design stage, from the data and the modeling stage, through deployment and post deployment, to keep responsibility in mind at every step of the way. And one way to do that is when you're within a company and you're in a rush to deploy, if you have something like SafeCheck to give you these stop checks to make sure that you are actually building in accordance with values and responsibilities, ultimately ethical principles for safety. So safety for safe check. And by the way, safe in Arabic is this sword. And the sword is in the logo for safe check. So it's a pun on words. It's a safe check.
I saw that sword and I thought of a guard. I saw somebody guarding something, and I saw safe check. So I assumed that you're kind of championing the justice and equality and the use of that kind of technology because of
Yeah.
its powerful impact on society. But
Yeah,
it's
I wanted it to represent protection as well, like to protect people's rights, to keep people safe, actually SAFE safe, and showing that the safe can keep you safe in the safe check.
I want to ask, before the startup, you were a clinical pathologist and a medical researcher. What what led you one day to say, I'm interested in studying disease, and now I want to work on training machine learning algorithms or program in Python? What led to that transition?
The umbrella answer is it's a passion for knowledge, genuine. I love to learn, but there are two areas of major overlap. Pathology, specifically in medicine, is the practice of looking for patterns to identify anomalies, which in turn become the pathologies or the diseases. That's part one, and then part two. With pathology, a massive part of that subspecialty is focused on medical research, on advancing knowledge in the field. Albeit we've made great advancements in the last 100 years, the majority of the knowledge that we have in the medical world, I'd like to boast as being a product of pathology research. And now that research is dependent on data. So, as a pathologist working on research, I spent a lot of my time trying to make my research better than the next, or publishable or respectable in the publishing world. And in order to do that, you need to have good data analysis, and most importantly, great statistical analysis. So it was on that path of using statistical formula and algorithms to evaluate the data, to find associations, to look for trends in the patterns, that something sparked inside of me and said, the more measurements we have, the more tools that we use to identify patterns, gives us things like confidence intervals, or gives us things like true positive and false positive rates. And that's very important in reflecting statements. So I think, myself included, and most people, when you read medical publications, you look at the big headline and you say, for example, eating this will cause this. And you walk away with just that sort of main statement,
Mhm.
where in fact there's a nuance to it. And that nuance is, it's all the truth. The truth is not as simple as this causes this. It's this may cause this under this circumstance, or this may not cause this. So diving into these associations of variables led me down a path to pursue a bit of data science and data analytics, which then took me into programming, because data science uses programming languages. I started out with Stata when I was at Harvard doing clinical research, and then I took a few more courses in the AI scope in Stanford for healthcare, with AI, with MIT, and then I realized patterns and numbers are actually universal. And the way to find these trends is not very different between medicine and between data science or computer science. I gave a shot at machine learning, which is sort of a step in the evolution of the data science pathway, and absolutely loved it. I found my niche. It took me, albeit several decades, without giving away my age, but I finally found a place where the logic of the work matched the logic that had always existed within my own head. And so I continued to pursue it without haste. I pursued an ML engineering degree. And what I found in doing that is I was able to use the domain knowledge from medicine, from medical research, from pathology, and apply it to make very useful apps, AI apps, or machine learning algorithms that could solve solutions that otherwise would have taken us years in medicine, doing it manually as humans, and we would have been riddled with human error. So I just saw it as the logical next step, not just for myself but for the world. And like I said, I have a passion for knowledge, and the ML world is evolving every day with knowledge. Like, you have to keep up. It's, you have to be a researcher full time. You have to be a student full time. You have to apply what you learned full time. And each time you do, you build this better model, or you build something new and cool, which is instant gratification. And that's sort of the transition path that I took, which I think has led me down this path of, likewise with medicine, pathology, or any practice of healthcare, there's, it's built on the foundations, ideally, of ethics, of doing good, beneficence, of non-malfeasance, of not doing harm, of making sure that the benefits outweigh the risks, of making sure that, even the medical logo, there's the symbol for medicine. It's a snake
Right.
because, yeah, the snake's venom could be toxic. It can kill, or it, if extracted correctly, it can heal. um, and it's the way that you use the knowledge, which is very similar to what's happening in machine learning. It's the way that you use the tools, whether it's to benefit society or not. So I think not only the binary coding aspects, the patterns, the trends, the importance of data analysis, but also the ethics and the value at the core of it, they're the same applied to medicine and applied to machines.
I think there's three main pieces of information or insight that I take away from this, and it's that you love learning, you love knowledge, you love to be a champion of truth, and you like helping, or you see it as a responsibility to use that knowledge and learning and truth to help people. And I see how that three prong approach let you to say, I want to help people, let me figure out what's causing harm to these people. And then you're like, I'm seeking knowledge, and this knowledge is is a constraint. The way that I'm doing the seeking of knowledge is a constraint right now, and I want to help more people, want to do better, and I want to make sure that what I'm doing is based on reality, because reality is such a complex, interconnected formula. As you said, coffee
Yeah,
may hurt you or coffee may help you. It
yeah,
depends what kind of coffee, where's its source, how do you consume it? Does it have sugar, not sugar? Do you have
exactly.
pre-existing
Very
medical conditions? So you're figuring how to wrestle with the truth so you can give a personalized recommendation to the person that would most benefit from that information. And that's really cool. I appreciate that. Um,
I appreciate your eloquence and articulation that you said it better than I could. I wish you could have answered the question on my behalf.
no, you painted such a rich image, such a rich story as to how you've evolved as a person, what's led you through that journey to become who you are today. And I think that the journey is part of what makes you especially powerful, especially potent in being in this domain of technology, because you come with the notion that you're diagnosing disease and operations and organizations and how they behave, and use these black box technologies that otherwise are hidden from the perspective of the public.
It's the same as in humans. I mean, when I've been a patient myself, and so we say when we are patients and we go to the doctor, we go vulnerable, not knowing what's happening. We may have an inclination, but we are still looking for proof, and that proof in healthcare is when we go for our blood tests or we go for an X-ray, and then so if the doctor just told you, look, you have a broken bone, you'd be like, do I? Are you sure it's not a sprain or some other swelling? So you go for the x-ray, you come back with some proof. Now you're convinced, the doctor's convinced, and there's an agreed upon remedy schedule. So you say, okay, you need to rest, elevate, ice, compression, this pain medicine, or surgery, or whatever it may be. The same thing with machines. And by far, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in machine learning is we're the same. We're very similar. We learn machine learning. I would say is just maybe us when we were infants at this stage, and it's I mean it's evolving quickly, but the process of learning is the same. And so when you take the broken bone example, now you've got that proof in machine learning. If you give an algorithm, an ML algorithm, or we'll say AI app for the audience, when you give the AI app an input and you ask it do AI for me. What is it doing? It's doing one of two things. One, it's going to make a prediction, and that's going to be based on the data that was given, or it's going to classify, um, or it's going to take an image or a video, and it's going to give you an interpretation on it. It's going to say this is that or is not that. So it's identification. And when the machine gives you the output, consider it like the doctor saying your bone's broken. Great, but how do you know it's broken? So in the case of a machine learning example, you would say, how did you come to that decision? And that's where explainable AI comes in, which is, I would consider one of the more important. I mean, all the principles of responsible AI are important, but this explainability algorithm, which translates into interpretability for us as end users, is the equivalent of getting that x-ray to say, I know that the bone is broken. In the case of machine learning, you'd say, I know how you made that decision. You decided that this is the prediction because this plus this equal this, or this variable, when it's around this variable, gives us this trajectory. So very similar in behavior, in learning styles, and in impact on us as a society at large.
I've noticed that the best doctors are the ones that guide you through with no assumption of underlying knowledge. From here's what you've told me has happened, here's the evidence that we're both seeing within the shared reality that we have, and here's based on my extensive medical experience what I believe is the cause, the outcome, and how we're going to solve in this period of time. I mean, I can see how that would be the same as, you have an algorithm or you have some sort of application being done with vast amounts of data, but it's bad data, or it's good data, but it's a bad model, or you're not putting enough people in the loop to make sure that the model itself is being corrected or adjusted to really represent what reality it's looking to represent. So I can see how you're
You
looking
bring
at.
up a you bring up a great point there. So I was trained at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and I have a great respect for this college because they imposed on us a sort of very traditional approach to medicine. It's not the common modern Western approach. We went with a very old structured approach. I mean, the school's been around since the 1700s, and they impressed upon us. I mean, to the point of drilling it in our brains and into our DNA that your approach to a sick patient starts with observation. It's you have to look and pay attention to every as many details as you can. The second is listen. And so you listen to every word, the type of words the patient uses, what they say, how they say it, their behaviors and postures. You're always paying attention, and then you go into an examination and a history where you prompt questions. Similarly, in machine learning, there is a state of observation that has to be done constantly. And this is from the perspective of an AI developer, an ML developer, is paying attention to all those details along the way to make sure that, like you said, the data or the model is appropriate and is used appropriately to give you a true reflection of the reality. So, great analogy.
I love that you're bringing this classical teaching, this philosophy that things are rooted in observation and evidence, and you have to kind of like really sit in it and steep in that to understand how that's shaping the symptoms, because there's a root cause. They're moving in a certain direction, and that direction is not a good direction. It's causing them pain in small increments, but it's accruing. So
Right.
I really appreciate that. We're looking at how, okay, you're based out of Saudi Arabia. I mean,
Yeah.
the country itself, not the territory that you're in, but what led you to create this startup in that environment, and what are some of the nuances in that environment? I'm based out of the US, so I lack context as
Sure.
to.
I'll tell you, number one, this region at large has been developing and booming for some time. And the development is a direct product of the vision and the insight of the leaders, of the government leaders. So as a person living in any place in the world, you remember Maslow's pyramid, you know, from school day psychology, how you
Mhm.
start at the bottom with safety and security, and then it comes, I think safety and security is first, and then it's the physiological needs. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it is
I
that
think
way.
it's food, water, oxygen, and then you have shelter and clothing, and then belonging and all that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah. So with safety and security, I would say it's one of the fundamental principles that you would use to decide where do you want to be. And looking around the world, you may have different opinions about what defines safety and security for you. For me, one of the most pressing things is making sure that the region is safe. I don't think I've ever seen a safer place in the world than Saudi Arabia. I mean, as a female, I can walk out in the middle of the night to get groceries completely comfortably. I can leave my door unlocked and feel safe. So there's a safety and a security aspect, and there's the vision of the leaders, which aligns with what has always been my vision. And I'm talking about my vision as a child. I always saw a very, I don't want to say utopic world, but a progressive world that focuses on things that matter and makes an effort to invest in those things. And that's what Saudi Arabia is doing. Saudi is investing in things that matter to people, uh, eh, both you consider sports and entertainment, yes, environment, education, and technology. And AI is one of the major areas that has been getting a lot of good, powerful support. And so it's a very conducive environment to grow new technology. You can get general support. It's if I discuss AI to the average person here, most people are fluent. It's oddly surprising. The average person here who you meet at a supermarket is tech savvy in that they have a mobile phone, they know how to use it, they're ordering most of their products with different apps, or they're engaging with government services using apps. So it's a very tech savvy society, a tech engaged society, and the concepts and ideas associated around
Around
AI
AI
are
are
quite familiar to most people. And so it's a great environment to nurture new ideas, new technology. Um, in addition to that, starting something as a female in Saudi, we have huge female empowerment here. And I know, I've worked in North America, I've worked in Europe, and I've worked in the Middle East. And everywhere I had been prior to being in Saudi, there was this struggle for women's equality. There was always this pay gap or this gender inequality, or men were given more than women. In Saudi, it's, if anything, it's the opposite. We're given so much respect, so much support, and having initiated the idea of Safe Check, I was in the Antler VC, which is a entrepreneurship and residence program, and there was a decent representation of women, but super support for, you're a female in tech and we love it, and other companies in Riyadh who were involved were like, female in tech, we love it. So there's dopamine boost. That's the environment.
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, I'm very happy that it's a environment that is conducive to fostering ethical and sustainable and people-centric technologies, organizations, and it's paving the way for women entrepreneurs to build real businesses that are going to create jobs in this evolving society ecosystem, etc. And in the global setting, because I'm sure that they want to compete with all the other countries with their own respective innovations. um, I think now, as you painted a good picture of the love of knowledge and education and all these things, it would be appropriate to talk a little bit more about your area of expertise and some of the definitions that you had wanted to talk about, so we can
Yeah.
lay the context for the conversation.
Yeah, so just in terms of my own background or specialty, as you mentioned, I'm a medical doctor by training, a pathologist by specialty, clinical pathologist. I'm a machine learning engineer, and my focus has been it evolved from AI in healthcare to, in general, explanatory AI and ethical AI through the deployment of multiple projects. So I had a couple of roles as the Impact Hub lead at an organization called Amdena, which was doing AI for good in communities, and did a massive amount of projects with them. Every project that I did do, we included explainable AI, and that's a definition I might give you to start with, where explainable AI is the it's the usage of metrics for performance. So what you might hear often people saying, "Oh, I have a model that had a 95% accuracy or a 98% accuracy." That accuracy speaks specifically to the behavior of one algorithm. It doesn't necessarily give you the insight into the data that was used, how it was used within the choice of algorithm. So explainable AI is the tools, statistical tools, visual tools that we use to explain how a machine made its decision, where in the neural network, another parallel to medicine, the neural network of a machine model is akin to the neural network within your own brain. So you start with a neuron, or a node that we call it in machine learning, and it connects to another node or a series of other nodes. The decision to go this way or this way is made by the training, is made by the data that's used and the choice of algorithm. So if you choose the number one, logically you would think of the number two and go on. But if you train the number one with just binary, it would go to zero. So the choice of the next neuron that's connected, same as in the human brain, it's connected like this. In the same way, there's a direction and there's a transmission of information. The importance on each pathway. So pathway one might be a more important choice given the environment that you're in. So if we're saying one, if I say one to you and you say two as a response to me, we might be thinking in a very mathematical way if we were in a classroom. But if we were in a room full of computers, and I said one, you might say zero next. So there are factors that guide the decision, the pathway, and those are called weights and biases, and we put those on different nodes. Now, I'm telling you this so that you understand when we do explainable AI, at the end you get an output and you want to say, how did you get to this output from this input? You say, because these were the biases, these were the weights, these were the directions that we took. So that's one definition. Another definition is responsibility and responsible AI, but I'll let you speak to the explainable AI.
No,
Yeah.
I like that visual theater of explaining that there's neurons and that the neurons have neural pathways, and based on how we behave and how we move with our bodies, we're sending the signals between the neurons to communicate to our brain and communicate back to our muscles how we want to behave and move based on feedback, whatever stimuli we're receiving in our environment. But in a simplified manner, it's like showing your math work when you're doing your math. If you're going to do 12 times 12, you want to do 2 times 2 or 2 times 12, 10 times 12, this plus this equals this number. And you showing your work is granting transparency into the
Exactly.
function, into the transactions that are occurring in that in that system. So I appreciate the biological example.
That's such a great way. I might use that in future examples. That's such a brilliant way. It's showing your work, just like in school. How did you get to this answer? That's exactly what transparency is. And for the sake of for vocabulary, when we say explainability in AI, we're talking about the machine's ability to show you that process of decision making. When we say interpretability, we're talking about the end user who gets that answer and now can say, I've understood very clearly how the machine made that decision. And those are both pivotal points of responsible AI. But if it's okay with you, there's a definition I'd like to share.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're using words like responsible in responsible AI. Uh, I'll just ask you real quick, what how would you define simply the word responsible?
I am also a lover of knowledge. I am very anytime that I see a word, I go and I look at the etymology of it, and I look at the
Yes.
building blocks, and I look at the modifiers, and I try to like construct my own words from that. But responsible is the ability to be able to respond. Your ability to respond is responsible. That is the functional representation of what I understand responsibility to be. I place you in responsibility of guarding this box of chocolates. So you are able to respond and defend this box of chocolates. But
Precisely. Yeah. And broken down a little bit further, is the act of doing again or going back and showing something. So, like you said, responding
permanent,
is giving back again. Spawn is actually from sponsor in Latin in the etymology, and sponsor in the sense that it means an obligation towards. So you're going back with an obligation towards, and sponsor also means a guarantee or a surety. So your ability to guarantee that you can go back. So if you've done something or you're responsible for something, you are held accountable. It means you are expected to justify how and why you secured or gave that guarantee to whatever it was you were taking care of. Now in machine learning, it's all the same. When we say responsible, we mean there are two parts. There's the person who designed the algorithm who should be responsible. So the developer is responsible. And then when we say responsible AI, we mean was what was designed behaving responsibly. So the actual AI app or solution, is it behaving responsibly, which is a direct outcome of the developer designing it to behave responsibly. And so, for that reason, my own definition of responsible AI is data centric and human centric solutions. And we can go into those definitions in a bit, but it essentially means that the AI should be built around a focus of the data, balance, fairness, responsibility, representation, uh, selection, feature selection, and use. And remember the weights and nodes I told you about, getting a domain specialist for whatever data it is to make those decisions the same way a human would. And human centric, meaning that it's focused on the safety for humans, one, two, that there's human oversight, um, and three, to make sure that it doesn't overtake a human task in a way that is not beneficial. And if it does, it should be beneficial. Um, so it's actually a definition for the developers and for the AI itself. It's two pronged.
One thing I think that wasn't, I think that I'm still wanting to explore a little further is that I gave a very simplified representation, a mathematical representation, which is functional. There's this, there's a transformation, and then there's this output. But you said that there's weight and biases, which leads me to believe that there's a tolerance, a fuzziness for how to interpret a positive or a negative scenario because you're training
Yes.
something to behave in another way, or you, yeah, it's like there's a system and there's inputs and outputs. So how do you ensure that the outputs are mirroring your expectations, right?
Precisely. Exactly. Your mathematical example was great. I mean, in terms of an allegory to what happens in terms of showing your work for explainability, it's great. But the actual function of the neural networks, it's like I said, it's like us when we were children. When you first saw a picture of a cat or a lion and you were learning what is this thing, you your eyes processed that image of a cartoon lion, for example, and it was yellow and it was like this color and it was brown and it had this, looked a bit like me, it had big hair. So then you said, okay, that's a lion, okay, and you've got that in your head. And then as you grew over the years, you saw other pictures of lions and other pictures of cats, and you formed associations. And you said, okay, there are variations or permutations of this original template that I have in my brain. Likewise with machine learning. And that's actually something that speaks to what is usually considered a difficult definition, but it's not. And I'll explain. There's something called data drift or model drift. And it's one of the areas that speak to why something like safe check or why safe check is so valuable. So let's say you have an AI model and it's out there in the market, and it's you're giving it input and it's giving outputs, and the customers are happy and the company's happy, so everyone's happy this thing is working. It was trained on a certain set of training data. Okay, that training data went in and told it, when you see whiskers, ears, and tail, it's a cat. When you see big ears, a tongue sticking out, it's a dog. When you see small long tail, it's a rat. I'm just making a random example. Okay, so you know that it's trained on this, and now the model, every time you put the camera anywhere, it says that's a cat, that's a dog, that's a rat, and it's working great. Okay, when the app or when the camera is now looking at a tiger or a lion, the data that's coming in is now slightly different from the basic three images that were used in training, correct? But it might still identify the lion and say cat, because you've trained the model to just say cat, dog, rat. When data drift or model drift happens, what happens is the incoming data is different from the input data, from the training data. And then that causes a model to be weak. And you can experience that by saying, every time I showed a tiger or a lion, it's still saying cat. It's not telling me tiger or lion.
There's no context.
There's no context. So one of the keys to evolving models, or one of the reasons you'd want an audit, is to update that training data to make sure it's with the times. Make sure it's staying up to date. It's learning the same way you did as a kid. So you saw lion or you saw cat, and then as you got older, you learned there's cat, there's lion, there's tiger, and they have different sounds. Same with the machine learning model. That data needs to be updated to make the outputs updated. So that's another important definition and reason for getting your models evaluated. It's important to mention, many people are assuming that AI models and AI apps, they're the same as software apps on your iPhone. Like, for example, it's the same as any Photoshop app you use, or
It's
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 not.
yeah, people perceive it to be like this circuit board of decisions that are clearly and neatly fused in a particular way, if, else, and then, but it is sort of self shaping. It's like water in a container. It sort of moves and
Yeah,
changes its form, right?
exactly. It's if you were to consider it dimensionally, maybe this is a bit. Um, an average app on your phone could be considered two-dimensional. Then when you consider AI, it would be three or four-dimensional in that it has its own ability to sustain itself, to draw inference, to give justifications. Even explainable AI, there are models that have XAI built into it. So it has sort of self-evaluation. And then to blow your mind some more, you've got quantum computing.
No, I
Quantum
don't want to
computing
go
is
there.
like the X
I don't want to go.
dimension.
I don't want to.
It's happening. It's on its way. And then you've got the metaverse. So like the Spidey metaverse, it's not far off. Like it really could happen. And so anyway, so there's a differentiation in terms of the ability of these apps and how they work, how they need to be updated, and the reasons they need to be updated. Um, and it's different from software to AI. A couple important points in as an extension to the definition of responsible AI. When we say responsible AI, now we know the definition of responsible, and we said the AI model itself needs to behave responsibly. What does that entail? It entails that the model itself is fair. It should avoid bias and discrimination, and it shouldn't exacerbate any of the current inadequacies in our own world. An example of that, for example, is when you have these cancer detection apps, and I've worked on a couple where within the training data was taken just from a specific population. So we'll call it
Mm,
population purple. Okay,
mhm,
in real life, we have population purple, population orange, population fluorescent. We have all these different types of people. And then we have different age groups. So we have age 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 50 plus, and they have different risks. That's where those weights and biases come in. So
mhm,
when you talk about fairness, if I've trained a cancer detecting app on just population purple, when it goes out into the world, it's not going to recognize the cancer in population yellow or population green or population blue. And
mhm,
then that is unfair. It's also exacerbating an inequality that already exists in the world because maybe there was more purple data available because purple were the people who came to the hospitals.
mhm,
So that's fairness, and that's the first principle of responsible AI to make sure that is your model fair based on the data, is has it been fairly trained and does it fairly represent the population of interest or the sample population. And then the second aspect is transparency, which is explainability, interpretability, as we said. The third aspect is privacy and security. And that speaks, again, to two parts. One is sort of data governance frameworks, and then it's also your own privacy. So you want to
mhm,
make sure that the model itself, when it takes in the data, it's secure. If it's not secure, you're at risk of things like data poisoning. Data poisoning has happened. It's a real threat. It ain't no joke. It happened to Microsoft. It happened to Meta. It happened to some of the biggest names, and that's where sort of dirty, corrupt data feeds its way into the system, and it can hack the system, and it corrupts, it pollutes what would otherwise have been pure. So that's one aspect, and then the other thing is, as a consumer, you have some solution that you're using. A lot of people are using these like they take a photo in their bed of their face and they're like, I need a good LinkedIn picture. And then the AI takes that bed photo and makes you look like this stunning professional business model. And I'm sure a lot of people are using that AI image enhancer, and it's great. But one thing you would cross your mind is,
you're
what's
training
it
it.
doing with my picture? I'm training it. Where's my picture going? What else could be done? Did you see? Maybe I watched too much TikTok. I saw on TikTok this video, but it was published somewhere, like somewhere legit. It was on somewhere live, and there was this kid talking to her parents. So in real life, the kid is like 3 or 4 years old, but on the video screen, it was like a grown up version of her talking to her parents, and she's like, "Hi, mom and dad. This is me at age 15, and this is how I'll look in the future." And it looks like a real, live, legit person sitting and talking. It looks genuinely like this girl is a 15 or 16-year-old, and it's not. It's an AI generation based on her features, her voice, her mannerisms. And she goes to say, "Look what can be done with just the two or three images that you've posted of me online, that,
Mm.
shared memories." So that's another security issue. So you wonder, one or two pictures of yourself, what happens to it? Privacy and security, major issue. And then the
Falsifying
last,
identities, falsifying voices. If you have just a little bit of information, you can go and pretend you're that person and seek more information from friends and family that believe you to be
super
the the,
scary.
cor- the correct representation of the real entity.
Have you
Uh,
seen some of these deep fakes?
yeah, no, it's pretty crazy. And there's no regulation against the use. There's no way to validate if somebody's saying something true, especially if a person doesn't have the mechanisms in their mind to filter that information for true or false. Like, that doesn't seem like something that person would say. If they have no knowledge of that, they would just accept that and perverse some sort of brand or the
We
the
all do it.
person.
We would all do it. I mean, we all, especially when you're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or one of these, you're not exploring it with the eye of analysis. You're just sort of dopamine rush and entertainment. You're like, what happened? What happened? Then you'd be like, oh, George Clooney dyed his hair purple, and it's not true, but
The
whoever, whatever
entertainment
did.
idea. Yeah, it's plausible. If and plausibility is enough for somebody to take a jump and give a credit card information or tell them,
Yeah,
"I have the bank here," or, "Yeah, you're my grandkid and you need $10,000 because 'cause you're sick? Of course, I love you."
it's
Uh,
a good idea. I like that one. No, but I mean, yeah, the trajectory, the risk trajectory is really high. But that's that you're thinking in the right direction, in the wrong direction, I mean. The other thing is uh, accountability. So the accountability is, it's something I like to mention. It's sort of the last pillar, the last agreed upon pillar of AI responsibility. Um, I like this topic because accountability means it applies to all parties involved, or all stakeholders, they call them. I'm learning business terms with the new company, so I just learned this. But it applies to all stakeholders along the way. So the organizations or companies that are developing or deploying an app, they should be held accountable for what goes out. That's where SafeCheck comes in, to make sure that when you're being held accountable, you have done responsibly to be accountable. But why I really like this topic is, when we say accountability, we speak to the graphic user designer. So the graphic artist and the team is accountable for saying, did you put the back button in the right place and the next button in the right place? If not, you'll be held accountable for a poor app performance, like people
Mhm.
aren't using the app. Okay, then there's accountability for the person who's behind the idea. Were you comprehensive in your idea? Accountability. Then there's the app developers, whether it's a software app or an AI app. The engineers, the software or machine learning engineers, will be accountable for the type of data that was used. Was a proper data analysis done? Were the features done correctly? Was a domain specialist brought in? Each of these people are held accountable. So there's a series of people involved who are to be held accountable. And then, according to my own theory, the AI itself should be held accountable to some degree. It's assigning an equalness to both parties, and I'll segue that into one of the aspects of what I do in SafeCheck, which is, in addition to responsibility evaluations, which are quantified, there's this environmental aspect. And what I mean by environmental is, yes, we look at things like GPU usage and how that affects carbon output, um, uh, waste. It was waste handled well. There's physical waste when you're programming and coding, and then there's electronic waste, and all of that has an impact. I mean, everything we do has an impact, and so we measure that. But more specifically with the environment, I touched on this with you earlier on, was is the concept that we have living beings as a part of our world ecosystem. We have plants. mushrooms. We have different species of flora. We have different species of pathogens, still living beings. We have different species of animals, and we have human species. We're species by definition because we interact together. We're a species because we give and we take from each other symbiotically in a way that leads us towards some growth or evolution. We give plants certain gases. Plants give us back other gases. We give plants some of our waste or decay, and it produces new life for us to consume. That's uh, input output, like you said. It's a give and take. Same with animals, albeit animals give us way more than we give them. I think they're the best thing, one of the best creations in the world. But I mean, we give them food, like house pets, for example. We give them food and water and hugs and kisses, and they give us unconditional love and knowledge and pure joy and wisdom and everything beautiful in this world. So, I mean, it's still a give and a take. And what I'd like to do is to consider how accountable the AI or the algorithm that is evolving, how it takes care of each of these species. So if you've produced an app that looks at agriculture or deforestation or where's the best place to plant or crop degradation, is the app actually doing the right amount of good for that species? If it's an app for animals, is it doing, if it's an app to predict coral reef health, is it doing good for that species? But in reverse, is the app that's evolving being held accountable? And from 80s babies, confession, 80s babies, we grew up as kids in the 90s watching the Terminator. You're familiar, you know, I'll be back. Yeah,
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, if you've watched the Terminator, you know about Skynet. And as much as we all loved the Terminator, um, it's based on a very solid principle that is a part of our reality today. And that is that as AI became sentient for all purposes of the definition, embodied in a robot,
Mhm.
and was able to make decisions, was able to almost feel or empathize, reason, justify, and have the programming to protect
Itself.
John Connor,
Okay. Mhm.
right? But it could have just as well, and the other, the one with the arm sword, you remember that guy? Like the other Terminators were not programmed with that. They were the more evolved models, and they were out for destruction. They were programmed for destruction. So you take something like the Skynet effect, and it makes it very important for me to impress upon the world right now that we build from a foundation of accountability, that we build from a foundation of responsibility, such that we're asking, is the AI good for plants? Is it good for animals? Does it do good for humans? Let's evaluate the AI itself as a species as well. Is if it is it evolving in the right direction? Is it evolving in balance as much as we are? The output we get from it, does it match our benefit? And does it benefit itself more? If it's benefiting itself more and learning more and growing more and not giving us any additional output, then we've got the Terminator. So
I think I agree with you there. I think we need to democratize the knowledge, the tools, the lessons learned, the best practices, the reasoning behind the classical training that you learned in your early formative medical training. That we need to impress upon people the fact that this is incredibly powerful technologies, and you are responsible for either being a active participant in this evolution that we're all being a part of in the world, or you're just going to be an innocent bystander. But it's better for you to be AI literate, to be aware of what's going on, and to peer in the black boxes and ask for transparency, because we don't want to have something evolve in a way that does not align with humanity's needs and wants, and the way that we should be shaping society to preserve life, in the highest possible sense. We even touched upon this very slightly before we started the recording. We've already have the technology to feed everybody on the planet, and we're dwelling on these things of AI. How do we bring everything and ground some sort of truth and honor, and champion the interest of the hungry, of the people that are not able to defend themselves? How do we lift people up with these technologies that have such a wide reaching impact?
We need responsible human principles. We need to become responsible humans and then demand it of our AI. Find our humanity before we impose human-centric mandates on a new technology. I think we have a lot of evolving still to do ourselves. Not I think, I'm sure we do. We,
That's a harder
we have
problem to tackle than aesthetic representation of a small piece of knowledge and reasoning capabilities.
it
Um,
would be a bit scary if the machines figured it out better and faster than us. I mean, how many eons have we been around for? We're still hurting each other. I mean, we love each other. There's great beauty in this world, but there's also so much that can be perceived, albeit subjectively, but that can be perceived as um, injustice or pain or hurt. And we're just not a benevolent society yet. Um, I wanted to also touch on. I know we wanted to talk about sort of the importance of responsible AI. Why is it important for us? And I know we touched on it a bit, but there are sort of six categories of risk that if I had to sum up the risks, it sort of speaks to the importance. So we can take any example you want. Give me an AI app example, one of your favorites.
I let's talk about food. Let's talk about AI that supports agricultural production. So we can do more food production with less farmers.
Cool. All right. So we have something that can make suggestions. For example, let's say it was a like a chatbot style farmer assistant, a farmer's co-pilot. Okay, hypothetically, and the idea behind it is to give insight into how to optimize farming usage, minimize crop damage, minimize harm to the environment. All right, let's say that was the sort of idea behind the model. And a good model always identifies the problem first and then creates a solution. So we've done that. The risks that could happen. So I'll read you a risk and you tell me, or we can discuss together how it manifests in this example. So there's performance risks within the app. Those things are like error and bias or performance instability. In the farming example, if we were looking at, I don't know, corn, it's the first crop that comes to my mind. If we trained it on a different species of corn,
Mm.
and we told the app, let us know when uh, what are signs of degradation or decay, and when should we get rid of this crop, or when should we give it more water, or how do we optimize it. If it didn't recognize that, it might give us the wrong answer. So then we might put that risk of performance through error and bias on the outcome, on the species. Okay. Then there's the security risks. Security risks usually things like cybersecurity risks, or like I told you, data poisoning. But just as well, if some nefarious group wanted to really damage your crops and they infiltrated your app, then they would send some malware that would ultimately cause the AI solution itself to give you the wrong care, and it put extra water when it doesn't need water, and then you drown it or you intoxicate it, whatever it might be. So that's security risks. And then there's control risks, and control risks are things like detecting rogue or unintended consequences or not having accountability. So if the app in that case were to tell you there's bad soil, get rid of all of the crops, and it's not true, and you would do massive damage. Those are sort of the application level risks. And then on the corporate side, for the people who are developing the app, they have risks like enterprise risks, everything from their own reputation, which I'll give you some examples. There's litigations happening left, right, and center, financial litigations, civil litigations, um, discrimination litigations, all sorts of stories. I'll give you some examples just now. Economic risks are another set of risks you face. So there's people losing their jobs when an app goes bad. There's also jobs being displaced. There's a chance of enhancing the inequality, as we said. You know, when we talked about the purple versus multiple populations, if there's already an inequality, it's exacerbated with AI apps because it performs how it was trained. And then there's societal risks like misinformation, which we're seeing a ton of. I mean, there's so much what they call fake news, misinformation, and like you said, we're not likely to pick it up. We're just going to scroll and accept it at face value, and then that can evolve itself into crazy things like surveillance problems. Think about when it's applied to drones or warfare, or like it can just keep going. And so there's those sort of risks inherent with not being responsible. And I told you I'd give you examples. Example time. If you're keeping up with the news and the tech news, yesterday Tesla recalled almost all of its vehicles. Tesla recalled almost all vehicles. That's unprecedented. Prior to this, a few months ago, they recalled 360,000 vehicles. Why? A lot of these vehicles, and not just Tesla, other EVs as well, are being trained on data that don't recognize certain things. So they might be crashing into trees or they might be crashing into people based on what the training data was. So there was
Mhm.
another company, not Tesla, but there was another company that had EVs that was trained only on a certain type of person, like certain type, excuse me, of man. So it wasn't recognizing people of color or children or the elderly.
Mhm.
Can you imagine we've got automated vehicles badly trained and it's
Running
like
over kids. Yeah.
it's Mario Kart. It's how we play Mario Kart, but then it's happening in real life. So that's a major sort of societal risk. Then there was Goldman Sachs and Apple who settled a $5 billion settlement over some credit card algorithm. Again, it was training algorithms based on biased data. Meta was found using some pirated data, and then they had a privacy leak, and that speaks again to data integrity and data quality. There's been lawsuits across the board with different companies for discrimination in insurance, discrimination with housing buying. I don't know if you remember, Zillow lost in the market like almost $500 million, and a whole ton of their employees. So I mean, there's big companies. There was a cookbook that was published on Amazon AI, a cookbook. This was a while back. And it was an AI authored book and it was promoting some sort of poisonous herbs or some poisonous ingredients.
It wasn't founded on truth. It was just randomly generated with whatever crappy GPT or artificial intelligence agent. Yeah, yeah,
So
that's a cause of concern. The explosion of information and misinformation is just what do we do with it? We have to
we,
audit.
we, we have to audit. I mean, there's the as we said, the cat's out of the bag. It's already there's a billion, trillion, zillion models out there, learning and growing and evolving. And you're not going to be able to put a chain on all of them. But what you can do is one, teach the principles, the values, introduce the vocabulary of responsible AI, and that should speak to an evolving mindset. And then two, put metrics for evaluation. So there's all these regulatory frameworks going up and around the world. Europe's got the Digital Services Act in February. Canada's got the AI and Data Act. Australia has the AI Governance Act. The U.S. President was it about end of October issued that the bill of what's it called the U.S. It was like it was a bill for AI suggesting the frameworks, the regulatory frameworks. So, I mean, a lot of the leading or developed countries are pushing compliance and regulatory frameworks. And frameworks are great, but how do you measure compliance? It's like same thing with patients. You can give them the right medication, but how do you know they're going home and taking the right tablets at the right time? There's got to be a quantifiable way of evaluating it. And that's what we're doing at SafeCheck. We're using quantifiable metrics with justified reasoning to explain why yes or why no for different aspects of responsible AI. Uh,
Who would be the ideal organization to come to you for an audit to remain compliant in this ever changing landscape or get ahead? Because, as you said, these governments are implementing these rough drafts and they're just trying to rapidly make sense of this evolving landscape ecosystem. Uh, all sorts of positive and negative actors are producing a huge impact on society in a way that we can't even begin to reason because there's so much going on simultaneously. Who needs to get in touch with you to get ahead of the curve and make sure that they're compliant with ethical uses of data, good uses of data, ways that are holistic, that have a full representation of the people that it's meant to serve, right? Because it's okay if it has a slice of one particular purple group, if the purple group is the only one that's going to consume that. But if it's
right.
meant to serve orange, green, fluorescent, purple, then how do we ensure that it's not going to cause harm? Because those different groups of people may have different psychological or physical or genetic compositions that aren't so cookie cutter, and you can't really make the assertion that one treatment will serve them the same way. Um,
Yeah, you're right. It's not a cookie cutter model. So who would want to get in? Who should get in touch with us? The big answer is anyone who's using AI, anyone who's got an AI app that they're deploying or they're using. But the major, uh, it's those who are who are concerned about major risks. So if it's in healthcare and you're doing diagnostics, you don't want that to be wrong, or you don't want to make false claims that our AI has this 99% accuracy, and that accuracy is not actually a reflection of the neural network itself process. There's other companies who are developing apps for other companies in terms of accountability should be implementing a process like getting a safe check, getting an audit to make sure that they're correct. Companies like we said, Tesla, or big companies, or Meta, people who are reaching massive amounts of people are automatically putting that technology within hands reach of those people, and therefore there's data and privacy issues that need to be met before it goes out. So before you deploy new model EV cars into the street and it's going to run over anything, maybe do a safe check and make sure that your data is actually representative of the population. Likewise, for these companies that are doing insurance or HR apps, you look at people with HR apps, and there was a couple examples that happened as well with Microsoft. They had an HR app, but there's these discriminatory practices that happen where the training data was like all men or all women or all one
Purple.
group, and
Yeah.
then rejected everyone else. So who should contact us? Whoever is concerned about their risk of bias and deployment, and the sequelae that follow that, all of the potential trajectories.
And what would they anticipate to be able to experience? Like what does an engagement typically look like with SafeCheck?
Well, number one, it's the good thing is there's no code sharing and no data set sharing. So I've tried to make sure that there's a reduced risk for cross contamination. Neither my software needs to be installed and contaminate you, nor do you need to upload. So practicing what I preach, kind of thing, making sure there's no chance of cross poisoning. That's the first feature. The second thing is it's an intake evaluation. So it's kind of like talking to a co-pilot. And so what the experience would be is, Joaquin has Joaquin version 1.0 app, and you want it evaluated, and you would run through several different modules of evaluation where we'd look into the data, we'd look at certain equations, we'd look at your actual model selection and some formula and some outputs. Now what happens is you get a report from us. So we do evaluation, reporting, certification, those three things. When you get the report from us, we'll tell you on your model side, your model shows balance or not balance, fairness or not fairness, weight distribution is equal and just or equal and unjust. So you get this sort of report from us that tells you what you've done right and what you've done wrong, or what can be optimized. And then we'll make recommendations on how you can fix or optimize all the different processes. And then you get that score. So the score is like a badge of glory. And it's like when you get a, you can stamp your safe check badge on your website or on your promo material to let consumers or other businesses know that you've passed. You can say, I got a grade A on my safe check, or I got a grade B on my safe check. And then that sort of validates what you're doing and how far you've taken your sense of responsibility.
It's like the sanitation inspector for people that go to restaurants. You get the seal of approval. Okay, we clean our pans, and the
Yeah,
oil that we use is changed every couple of days. You're not
it's
eating the plate.
exactly that.
Okay.
Exactly that. We're the sanitation guys for AI. That's you could say.
Are there anything? Uh, is there anything that you'd like to leave as an impression upon the audience members, upon the listeners of this podcast, in their pursuit of truth, of human-centric solutions, and making sure that they're safe?
Yeah, just to say, let's highlight the beauty and the glory of this age that we live in, where knowledge acquisition has become exponential. Technology has played such a extraordinary and beautiful role in our lives. We can access things faster. We have ideas, and we can research them on the spot. There's no more library like in the 80s when we'd go to the library and check out appendix. So I mean, life has gotten easier. Life has gotten faster. Knowledge sharing has become more optimized. And with that responsibility, I'm quoting Marvel again, but with that power comes responsibility, and that means when you're sharing the knowledge, make sure it has been referenced, make sure there's citations. So we still need to have a respect, for honoring source of knowledge, and that means the right acquisition, the right labeling, the right balance. So we have this beautiful technology. We live in such an amazing time. It requires respect for the technology that we have, and if we jumpstart and lose that sense of respect and honor for the data that we're using and for the process that we're using, well, then we end up with Skynet and the bad Terminator. And if we do it right, we end up in a more utopic world where we live symbiotically with this new species called AI, and live better, and maybe even learn from them. Maybe even we'll gain our humanity back from them.
But we need to take those choices today. We need to take those choices
That's
today
it.
before it's too late, and we can't be passive actors in this evolving landscape. It's evolving far faster than we can reason with, but we need to take the first step and at least educate ourselves on what it is and how it impacts us and why it's important. And I really appreciate you, Dr. Shaista Hussain, giving us a broad explanation on what AI is and why we should be very vigilant
Yeah.
to ensure that we turn black boxes into white boxes and be able to inspect the work of these agents that are otherwise, obfuscated with mystery, and who knows what's going on in that machine? Who knows
And
what that?
wait till quantum computing comes out. I know you don't want to talk about it, but we got to
Ah,
get this right now. We've got to
yeah.
figure out how to do this now, because when that metaverse pops up on us and these quantum processes are happening multiple verses in parallel at the same time, we need to make sure that the foundation is solid. And if that foundation is not solid, we're at risk. All the risks we have now are kindergarten compared to what could happen. So we've got to get our habits right now, and and make sure that we have the right good multiverses, not the scary ones.
Well, thank you for that. Let me